Section 10 of the Mabinogion, Volume 1, translated by Lady Charlotte Guest. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Martin Geeson. Section 10. And the next day Peredur set forth towards the mound of mourning. By thy hand, Lord, but I will go with thee, said Etlym. Then they went forwards till they came in sight of the mound and the tents. Go unto yonder men, said Peredur to Etlym, and desire them to come and do me homage. So Etlym went unto them, and said unto them thus, Come and do homage to my lord. Who is thy lord? Said they. Peredur with the long lance is my lord, said Etlym. Were it permitted to slay a messenger, thou shouldest not go back to thy lord alive, for making unto kings and earls and barons so arrogant a demand as to go and do him homage. Peredur desired him to go back to them, and to give them their choice, either to do him homage, or to do battle with him. And they chose rather to do battle. And that day Peredur overthrew the owners of 100 tents. And the next day he overthrew the owners of 100 more. And the third day the remaining 100 took counsel to do homage to Peredur. And Peredur enquired of them wherefore they were there. And they told him they were guarding the serpent until he should die. For then should we fight for the stone among ourselves, and whoever should be conqueror among us would have the stone. Await here, said Peredur, and I will go to encounter the serpent. Not so, lord, said they, we will go all together to encounter the serpent. Verily, said Peredur, that I will not permit, for if the serpent be slain, I shall derive no more fame therefrom than one of you. Then he went to the place where the serpent was, and slew it, and came back to them, and said, Reckon up what you have spent since you have been here, and I will repay you to the full. And he paid to each what he said was his claim. And he required of them only that they should acknowledge themselves his vassals. And he said to Etlym, Go back unto her whom thou lovest best, and I will go forwards, and I will reward thee for having been my attendant. And he gave Etlym the stone. Heaven repay thee, and prosper thee, said Etlym. And Peredur rode thence, and he came to the fairest valley he had ever seen, through which ran a river, and there he beheld many tents of various colours. And he marvelled still more at the number of water-mills and of windmills that he saw. And there rode up with him a tall auburn-haired man in a workman's garb. And Peredur enquired of him who he was. I am the chief miller, said he, of all the mills yonder. Wilt thou give me lodging? Said Peredur. I will gladly, he answered. And Peredur came to the miller's house, and the miller had a fair and pleasant dwelling. And Peredur asked money as a loan from the miller, that he might buy meat and liquor for himself, and for the household, and he promised that he would pay him again ere he went thence. And he enquired of the miller, wherefore such a multitude were there assembled. Said the miller to Peredur, One thing is certain, either thou art a man from afar, or thou art beside thyself. The Empress of Cristinobil the Great is here, and she will have no one but the man who is most valiant, for riches does she not require, and it was impossible to bring food for so many thousands as are here, therefore were all these mills constructed. And that night they took their rest. And the next day Peredur arose, and he equipped himself and his horse for the tournament. And among the other tents he beheld one which was the fairest he had ever seen. And he saw a beauteous maiden leaning her head out of a window of the tent. And he had never seen a maiden more lovely than she. And upon her was a garment of satin. And he gazed fixedly on the maiden, and began to love her greatly. And he remained there, gazing upon the maiden from morning until midday, and from midday until evening. And then the tournament was ended, and he went to his lodging, and drew off his armour. Then he asked money of the miller as a loan, and the miller's wife was wroth with Peredur. Nevertheless the miller lent him the money. And the next day he did in like manner as he had done the day before. And at night he came to his lodging, and took money as a loan from the miller. And the third day, as he was in the same place, gazing upon the maiden, he felt a hard blow between the neck and the shoulder, from the edge of an axe. And when he looked behind him, he saw that it was the miller. And the miller said to him, Do one of two things, either turn thy head from hence, or go to the tournament. And Peredur smiled on the miller, and went to the tournament. And all that encountered him that day he overthrew. And as many as he vanquished, he sent as a gift to the Empress, and their horses and arms he sent as a gift to the wife of the miller, in payment of the borrowed money. Peredur attended the tournament until all were overthrown, and he sent all the men to the prison of the Empress, and the horses and arms to the wife of the miller, in payment of the borrowed money. And the Empress sent to the knight of the mill, to ask him to come and visit her. And Peredur went not for the first, nor for the second message. And the third time she sent 100 knights, to bring him against his will. And they went to him, and told him their mission from the Empress. And Peredur fought well with them, and caused them to be bound like stags, and thrown into the mill dike. And the Empress sought advice of a wise man, who was in her council. And he said to her, With thy permission I will go to him myself. So he came to Peredur, and saluted him, and besought him, for the sake of the lady of his love, to come and visit the Empress. And they went, together with the miller. And Peredur went and sat down in the outer chamber of the tent, and she came and placed herself by his side. And there was but little discourse between them. And Peredur took his leave, and went to his lodging. And the next day he came to visit her, and when he came into the tent, there was no one chamber less decorated than the others, and they knew not where he would sit. And Peredur went and sat beside the Empress, and discoursed with her courteously. And while they were thus, they beheld a black man enter with a goblet full of wine in his hand. And he dropped upon his knee before the Empress, and besought her to give it to no one who would not fight with him for it. And she looked upon Peredur. "Lady," said he, "bestow on me the goblet." And Peredur drank the wine, and gave the goblet to the miller's wife. And while they were thus, behold, there entered a black man, of larger stature than the other, with a wild beast's claw in his hand, wrought into the form of a goblet, and filled with wine. And he presented it to the Empress, and besought her to give it to no one but the man who would fight with him. "Lady," said Peredur, "bestow it on me." And she gave it to him. And Peredur drank the wine, and sent the goblet to the wife of the miller. And while they were thus, behold, a rough looking, crisp haired man, taller than either of the others, came in with a bowl in his hand full of wine. And he bent upon his knee, and gave it into the hands of the Empress. And he besought her to give it to none but him who would fight with him for it. And she gave it to Peredur, and he sent it to the miller's wife. And that night Peredur returned to his lodging, and the next day he accoutred himself and his horse, and went to the meadow, and slew the 3 men. Then Peredur proceeded to the tent, and the Empress said to him, "Goodly Peredur, remember the faith thou didst pledge me, when I gave thee the stone, and thou didst kill the Addanc." "Lady," answered he, "thou sayest truth, I do remember it." And Peredur was entertained by the Empress 14 years, as the story relates. End of section 10. Recording by Martin Geeson in Haslemere, Surrey.